All right, so for everyone who doesn't know, we do have a special guest with us this evening. This is Robin Harris. Robin Harris is the co-chair of the Green Party of Florida. I'm the male co-chair, and we're here to talk about the Green New Deal. As everyone knows, the Green New Deal is in the news lately. This is an idea that I think we can largely thank the Green Party for bringing to the forefront, and it's something that a lot of people are going to be running on this next cycle. The Green Party of the U.S., their platform committee is accepting over the next few months amendments to the platform. And one of the things I was hoping Florida could do was offer them a stronger version of the Green New Deal. Our version was written in 2016, and the newer version was written more recently. And in some ways, it's stronger than our version. So I think that it's time for us to step to the plate and make sure that we are offering the best solution out there. So what we're hoping to do is to tour the state and get feedback from locals as to what we think the Green New Deal should be about. And also, very importantly, something that was brought to my attention by this article is the fact that while the original Green New Deal was funded federally, it was administered locally. And so I think it's important for us as Floridians to be ready with what it is that we need as a state. You know, if we find that we elect someone who's willing to institute the Green New Deal, to make sure that we have a voice in saying what the Green New Deal will be, because what's needed in Florida to mitigate climate change is different than what's needed in Alabama. We are kind of on the front line of that, with Miami already, doing sunny day flooding, and Delray Beach is seeing saltwater in their aquifers and all that good stuff. So, so we just want to talk about those things and get some feedback on what everyone felt, and then maybe, hopefully, by the time of the AMM, we can roll this into a suggestion from the state of Florida as to what the platform should say on the Green New Deal. So, first, if I can just get a volunteer, because she and I have been reading about this, all day long, to just give me an overview of what they think the Green New Deal is, what it says, what they think it means, what it is.
Reparations. Goal is reparations.
Anyone else? All right, so the Green New Deal, reparations, definitely should be one of the goals. Unfortunately, that is not listed in our Green New Deal, and that's something that I know that several people in the party are interested in. As a broad outline, the Green New Deal is fashioned after the original New Deal, and its idea is to begin what they characterize as a World War II type mobilization to start fighting climate change now. Because we should have been doing it for 50 years, we haven't, and it is now at such a point that we probably can't fix the problem or even mitigate the problem enough for us to survive without huge calamity, without kind of remaking our whole society. One of the issues that I think the Green New Deal needs to address, and the AOC version addresses it very well, I think ours does not quite so well, is the fact that as much as climate change is going to be a disaster, the Green New Deal is not going to be all flowers and roses. It's going to be a difficult thing. People are going to be uprooted and moved. They're going to lose their livelihoods and things like that. And so I think that's important that the Green New Deal consider that.
Just transition?
Exactly, a just transition. And I've been talking a lot here. So I know that when Robin first came across the Green New Deal, before we started deep diving into it, she had some concerns, some of which may have been assuaged, some of them which weren't. But maybe if you want to talk about that a little bit.
So, well, hi everybody. Thank you for having me and being here. So, yeah, we've been talking about it. I feel like I've been talking about the Green New Deal like forever, for weeks. So when I first read it, knowing that it's going to probably be on the platform, and knowing all this hype that's been around, whether who's is best or whatever. And so when I actually read it, I was very disappointed, because it does not address reparations. As a matter of fact, our Green New Deal, which was I think it first 2010 maybe.
Yeah, Howard Hawkins ran on it.
Howard Hawkins, who's now who is now seeking the nomination. Then Jill Stein ran on it. So my concern is there's no nuance. I mean, things have changed a lot since then, and we're still pushing the same language, the same solutions. So that was kind of problematic for me. And I guess about 2 years ago, when I was seeking office, I was at a black campaign school, and I was endorsed by the Black is Back Coalition, and they had begun crafting some political agendas for black and brown communities and poor people. And so because we always end up missing out of policy, and it's because a lot of times when things are written, whether it be the Green New Deal or policies, many of us black and brown people were not at the table. So that language is not there, or those solutions are not at the table. So that was some other things that I saw missing from our Green New Deal. Then AOC's came out, and at first I didn't want to read it. I'm like, oh, it's just going to be the same stuff. And so actually when I read it, I was impressed, and I could tell that it was not written actually probably not by politicians, but it was written probably by activists, and they probably had collected data from folks that had been impacted by the things that they were trying to address. When I saw the word, relieving us, and I'm kind of paraphrasing, from historic oppression, I mean, those are things that unfortunately our party it's not stated here. It's just not there, and we just can't make it be there. It's not there. And so I think Jeff had did the comparison in this article, and I still was like, I'm not reading it. So, but then I did. And so I have to give her a thumbs up for a great effort for collecting that data that's needed in making this transformation. And we've got, it looks like 10 years to do so. And another key thing to mention, LeBeau and I were talking about just how things are overlooked, because there's been a call for amendment changes in our platform, but I'll just say because of lack of education or knowing, or I didn't realize just how important it was. I didn't realize that the Green New Deal was a policy, was a potential policy for change. And that's what happens a lot of times. We're not aware, we're not educated about how to do things or how to navigate and what things can bring about this transformation. So we, I guess we want feedback, and we definitely want ours to be stronger, because right now it is not strong. So we can do that within Florida, and maybe do a study with impacted communities. And there's just so many things that we can that we could insert to make this transformational for us. I'm not sure what all I'm supposed to be talking about. But.
That's great. I brought this article because I think that in the middle of the article, there's a chart that does a pretty good job of breaking down what the Green New Deal is. But once again, before we begin, I still would like to hear if anyone wants to offer. I know that Matty, you said you wanted to say some things about your vision of the Green New Deal. Yeah. Before we get into the details of what's written, I want to hear what people think it says. So go ahead.
What I wrote was, what to me stood out as negative points, and I just, there's like 6 points that I've noted in each other. Like if I
Please
to go in detail over all of them, but in the being respectful for everyone else's time, maybe I will just go at the end and let everyone speak.
All right. So I'm going to run through this chart really quick as to the chart that was presented here, written by Jeff, who's our editor of our website, looked at Ocasio-Cortez's Green New Deal and the Green Party's Green New Deal, and I'm just going to go down the Green Party side. Protect the rights and needs of those who might be negatively impacted by a major transformation. Our Green New Deal does have a sentence about that, but it does pale in comparison to what the Dems have put forth, because they specifically speak about past impact and present impacts, and why that's important, considering how much the original New Deal left out communities of color and put neighborhoods through put freeways through neighborhoods and things like that. I think they do a very good job of making sure at the beginning and in the middle and at the end they go back to this again and again and again, saying the guiding principle will be, so that if it's passed, it's not just a matter of spending money, but there are criteria that are set forth. So I'd like to see us strengthen that language in ours. Move to 100% clean energy by 2030. invest in clean technologies, redirect research from fossil fuels towards wind, solar, tidal, and geothermal, and end fracking. Transition to 100% clean energy, which will foster democratic control of our energy system, include community, worker, and public ownership. End unemployment in America by guaranteeing a living wage for every American willing and able to work. Create clean energy generation, create jobs for retrofitting the grid into a smart grid, retrofit buildings for insulation and efficiency. Food systems must be based on sustainable organic agriculture, provide jobs in sustainable energy, transportation, and manufacturing infrastructure, transition to a comprehensive national mass transit program, and change decaying fossil fuel economy into a new green economy that is environmentally sustainable, economically secure, and socially just. So that is the portion that's laid out in our Green New Deal. AOC's Green New Deal has other things included in it. Some of that stuff, so we list our Green New Deal as part of an economic Bill of Rights, which I'm pretty sure we stole straight from FDR. We may have added a thing or two. The Economic Bill of Rights includes right to employment through a full employment program, workers' rights including a right to a living wage, a right to quality health care, a right to tuition-free public education, a right to decent affordable housing, and a right to accessible and affordable utilities. And so if you put those two together, along with our Green New Deal, you kind of sort of have what the Democrats have. So what do we think? What's missing? What should be there? You spoke about reparations. I want to hear your opinion on reparations, on what you think that might mean, and how you think that might fit into the Green New Deal, because this is something we've been going back and forth about all day long, and I'd love to hear another opinion on it.
I mean, there's several interviews that Howie Hawkins does, and they're all worth listening to. I could dig them up and forward them, but that's where I first heard about it. He says that he imported it from Europe, and the European Green New Deal specifically had the idea of nationalizing the energy sector and transitioning away from fossil fuels and towards the manufacturing of renewable and exporting that to former colonies, like as reparations. So like setting up 100% renewable energy sectors in these other countries, like for free, and like that's like one way of reparations. So like that could not only be here, in like underserved communities throughout the United States, like the federal government building renewable energy sources there and turning it over to the municipalities and the workers, but also exporting it like for free to
like all the Central American countries we robbed or whatever.
Right, the ones that have been, the ones that we owe reparations to. And how we would pay for that would be through defunding the defense, so that would roll back the imperialism and repay them with self-sustaining energy.
Right.
They could produce their own energy that wasn't
Energy infrastructure.
Right. Energy infrastructure. Right.
So what do we think about that, Robin? So, go ahead.
Well, when it comes to reparations, and Howie would not engage in a conversation with me about it. I'm not sure why, but it is not on his current platform. He has, I think, been misled into to think that reparations is not a necessary conversation now, and it is. So right. I don't just diss what that is, but reparations is like full repair,
right? And
that wouldn't make a full repair. And the President of Green New Deal, it's maybe an attempt. Even AOC it's a better attempt, unfortunately. I would love for the Green New Deal to be the champion of that. So this is where we talked about earlier, where I think those who have been impacted would need to be at the table to right. lead that conversation and lead the crafting in that. In the political agenda, we do talk about that. It's kind of vague. It's vaguely written only because there's like a list. So what we need to do would be to study HR 40. Right. That's a piece of legislation that's out there now, and even that needs some nuance. But there's like a list of things, for reparations
Right.
that makes a good attempt to make full repair, or as I told LeBeau earlier, to rectify those sins that's occurred to Black and brown people, indigenous people. So it's the Green New Deal doesn't have it,
Right.
unfortunately.
I really would like to hear some of your
So I
criticisms.
think this might be a good time to. So I'm just gonna read the points that I wrote. So involve indigenous community in conversations involving drafting proposals that affects land, water, and organic lives in this continent. Number two is there is no references to practices that increase soil organic carbon. So just right after the Europeans came here and started farming, European style farming, until like 1940, we lost 50% of our carbon content here in the soil, and there is nothing that indicates how we could restore that carbon back into our soil.
And I'm sorry, just to be sure, clear, you're reading from, this is from our platform.
Our platform.
Yeah, exactly.
I
Yeah,
haven't
yep.
even done their platform yet. So, which could be, these practices could be reducing, eliminating tillage, retaining stubble from previous crops, so improving crop management and all that. Okay, and first of all, we need to at least quantify the soil organic carbon stock of our country. Some of the European countries have done that, so we also need to do that. Waste management. The entire Green New Deal does nothing about waste management, and the way we handle our waste actually contributes to a lot of our emissions. And recycling and reducing waste plays an important role in climate protection by keeping trash out of incinerators and landfills. That's an incinerator right here, which was the only incinerator built in the last 20 years. Municipal solid waste management significantly contributes to emission in the atmosphere of greenhouse gases, and therefore the management process from collection to treatment and disposal has to be optimized in order to reduce these emissions. The fourth point is environmental racism. So environmental risks are not uniformly distributed across all groups. So age, poverty, minority status plays an important role. Living near the highway or diesel truck route is a big contributor. So people are negatively affected. Like a few days ago, there was also an article that says that actually statistically defined how racism plays a role, or race plays a role in terms of how people are affected. So if you look at people who are affected by asthma and like quantify them in terms of race, like most people who are affected were from the Black community and then from the Latino community. So this is how people were disproportionately affected. So it talks about single payer healthcare system, but when we actually repair the damages that were done, we also need to actually give more importance to the communities that are affected by this environmental racism, whether they were affected health-wise or whether they were affected economically, because people now pay for their health by their, a lot of times from their own pockets. So even like when we offer jobs, we need to actually just like we have affirmative action in terms of education. We need to actually give those communities more jobs and give them, offer them more access to healthcare. Currently, like indigenous communities and communities of color do not have proper access to healthcare. So, and I also saw this phrase about military, like when I read through this Green New Deal like a few weeks ago, then that phrase, that sentence is not there anymore. It says our good men and women, like putting our good men and women, in places where there are oil. So that sentence was like, like patronizing our military. We know that, our military have been engaging in, crimes against humanity and all that. We don't have to patronize our military. And second of all, why is there like only 50% of cut to the defense? There are countries that do not have military, like Switzerland. Like, why don't we move towards, no military at all? And local versus federal state control over energy decisions. I saw this phrase that, federally funded and locally
administered.
Yeah, so we should have the same kind of decision making in terms of energy. Like federal government shouldn't like say, I mean, I want this kind of, I want this infrastructure, I want, I need, energy from this source. Or the state shouldn't be making a decision. Rather, a local jurisdiction should be making that decision depending on their consumer needs. Why? Because that way you don't have to think about massive infrastructure. Like even with regards to wind here, I mean, which is also one of the energy that's recommended. Wind is actually responsible for like a lot of
Killing birds and things like that. Yeah.
exactly, yeah. So when we think about massive wind turbines and stuff, we are actually doing some damage to the environment one way or the other. So if we just think about generating wind from traffic, like kinetic energy from the traffic, from whether it be trains or from traffic, which people have achieved in other countries, and that doesn't involve massive infrastructure. It can only be constrained to a jurisdiction within that particular area. So that way we don't have to worry about investing massive infrastructure. When we think about investing on massive infrastructure, that's where the big corporations also come into play. We are talking about including co-ops and community-owned, worker-owned corporations. But there are corporations that are already there who have invested time and money in terms of lobbying. They have also invested in terms of research. They are Exxon and Shell are already doing some research in terms of renewable energy. So we are talking about focusing our energy on on those research. They are already doing those research because they don't want other people to do that research. They want to do that research and want to have that data, either hide that data or play or manipulate that data that is favorable for their corporations. A corporation is only going to think about profit. So they are either going to lobby the government for deregulations and all that, or they are going to continuously find new ways to generate more profit and not worry about the community and the environment. So instead, like you said, we should nationalize,
Right.
and take this power out of the corporations and not have the corporations run energy sector, or energy production should be a service to the community and not be for profit, in my opinion. Okay, I've taken enough space, so I should.
Thank you for that. So we've heard two calls to nationalize the energy sector, which I don't think is specifically called for in our Green New Deal. And I think that's definitely something that maybe we should be talking about. As we all sit here and trash talk our Green New Deal, let's recognize that it was first written in 2010, revised in 2012, and then in 2016. Even in 2016, when Jill Stein went out on the campaign trail and talked about the Green New Deal, they laughed in her face. Now that it's in the forefront and it's something that we're actually talking about, a lot of these details that were never considered before, because the great hump was just to get the idea of it out there, just hadn't been fleshed out. So I don't want to, make it look like, oh, the Green New Deal was this horrible pile of garbage that, how can you ever support this? But we live in a different era now than we did just a mere 2 years ago. And what seems possible now is not the same as then. But I do have the same concerns you have about this process being hijacked half the way through by corporations or whatever. So this idea of nationalizing the energy sector, I think, is definitely something to be considered. Can you just bullet point your list for me one more time so I can just...
Okay. So it's first thing is involving the indigenous community in these conversations.
All right, so I'm going to stop you right there. That's one of the things that started this conversation was Jeff, our managing editor, pointed out the fact that the AOC Green New Deal went to the effort of categorizing what they call vulnerable communities, actually listed them out, and they go through great efforts to talk about making sure that these vulnerable communities, frontline communities, not only have a seat at the table, but they're the first ones that are reached out to in making these plans and things like that. So I think that a lot of us agree that that's a weakness in our Green New Deal that needs to be shored up, and the type of language we want to address immediately, unless I'm wrong.
No, but what I would say is just my concern, like I said, I've been talking about this like for weeks now, is that I appreciate the wording of frontline, and she says frontline and vulnerable, and people of color. We have to be careful of that as Black people, or even if we say African, because we still get left out. Because when you start grouping people, then it kind of neutralizes the concerns and neutralizes solutions. So even with fat, we have to find a way, which is not difficult. We know we're in there somewhere, but exactly, where it would be, we'd want to be specific in that. I'm not, well, I'm kind of trashing our Green New Deal, a little bit, because we should have done a better job. But like I said earlier, I really paid it no attention that it was a policy-making piece of legislation. I just thought it was something that candidates were running on.
All right, so if you were to continue down the bullet point list, just so I can make sure that these get all the attention that they deserve. So the next thing on your bullet point list was?
SOC, like soil organic carbon, not AOC.
I think that is lumped in with the sustainable farming. Food systems to be based on sustainable organic agriculture. I think we can expand that language with more specifics. I don't think that that's something that we totally ignored, but definitely some of the specifics you bring in are things that that we should consider. And even on that particular one, it may be that we Floridians are facing that even more so, being the winter breadbasket for the country. It could be that we're exporting more of our carbon and nutrients to the rest of the country than a lot of other places are.
Can I interject for a
Please.
moment? So just to talk about the first 2 points, and also like one of the ways specifically that the original New Deal was racist was that it created like protections for workers to organize, but specifically left out farm workers because those were majority people of color. So like, for example, like the Coalition of Immokalee Workers, they're not a union because they can't be. So in reference to the first point, talking to the Coalition of Immokalee Workers about this is some way that we can specifically, like as a party and as as a local, we could put this into practice. Both of those 2 points.
If I can respond to, I think what's happening, and it's getting convoluted, is I think what, especially within the Hawkins campaign, is they're trying to reach a group of people that are not going to be green anyway, and that's like the working class whites.
Right.
This has been said specifically, but you can't leave everyone else out.
Right.
And try to gain, and they're probably not going to come. They're not going to be Greens anyway. They all voted for Trump.
Right.
So, but I think that's what that's speaking to. So, finding other people to talk to would probably definitely be a good idea.
Yeah, convincing the Coalition of Immokalee Workers, like, this is something that supports what you do, and then to hear, like what they think about, that point too. I mean, they're the ones in the soil, like literally.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, we should get on that immediately as a county party. Well, are they in our county or the next county over?
They're in Immokalee.
Right.
They're not in this county.
But nonetheless, we should, as a state party, we should reach out to them, and maybe the Palm Beach County Green Party, because there's not a chapter in Immokalee.
Or Immokalee, are they farmers or?
The Coalition of Immokalee Workers,
Mhm.
they're farm workers.
Okay.
The labor organization.
All right, bullet point.
Waste management. So, like moving to a zero waste solution and getting rid of incinerators and landfills that generate.
That's an excellent point. We don't address that at all.
Yeah.
And neither of them address that at all, actually. That's.
Fourth is environmental racism, like addressing the disparity. So,
Especially Florida.
I think that both Green New Deals do address that, but that we definitely, as I said, we've already agreed that we need to put that more to the forefront, and especially knowing the failings of the original Green New Deal, as Mark pointed out.
The fifth one is like moving to like making the local jurisdictions make the energy decisions.
So I think that currently, to some degree, both Green Deals address that. I think they both talk about things like public banks to handle the financing, and I think that they both focus on the idea that a lot of things will be locally controlled. That was kind of the point of the original, like, that's, to me, like, I've been reading a lot about the original New Deal. Mark always knows more about history than I do, but I've been reading a lot about the New Deal, excuse me. And that was one of the focuses, that was supposed to be, the intent of the focus is that it's going to be, as we said, federally paid for and locally administered. And I think that being a part of decentralization, that being one of our key values, it is definitely important that we,
I think there was something in there, I think it was, I can't remember which one it said public-private.
which I did not
Which
like. I
we
think
don't
that was the Dems.
Yeah.
I did not like that at all.
We don't
There's
want
there's
that.
some talk in the resolution that was passed in the House about public-private, whatever. And it's like, well,
Scary.
That's
in
like
America,
the-
that's going to
Exactly.
happen. In America, that's going to happen. When you start talking about it in the resolution of like what you want, your Santa Claus list, and you put in public-private partnerships, it's like, all right.
They also talk about like promoting local businesses but local businesses, once they start making profit, they are going to expand, their territory statewide or nationwide, and they're going to become a corporation one day. So
maybe-
if it's a co-op, it's fine, but.
Maybe refocus that to local economies rather than say local businesses.
Right. And also getting rid of corporations, and thus getting rid of massive energy infrastructure.
Once again, nationalizing.
And they should definitely address wind turbines.
Does that mean nationalizing? I'm like a little confused.
It doesn't necessarily mean nationalizing, but I can imagine how you would keep Exxon, et cetera, out of all the things he's talking about, from the lobbying and bribing to just owning the infrastructure
What
to
about
everything
regulations?
else, without actually just like taking their shit. Sorry?
What about regulation instead of nationalizing?
Who will end up running those regulations?
Well, let's start from taking lobby out of the question. I don't think the lobby is bribery. You see lobby here. You don't see people lobbying in other countries because it's considered bribery. So if you take that out of the equation, that's it. You kind of like solve like most of the problem. Not everything, because it's going to be always.
So you believe in pulling back from the idea of calling for nationalization and just calling for a stronger regulation
Right.
regime?
Like any social, democracy in Europe, they don't really, take over, the corporation itself, because they want people to just take some little profits that can come out with new ideas, but as, just put regulations that say, listen, I know you're making money, but we know we don't want to, we don't want you to be so greedy and ruin the whole economy, that's what's happening here at this moment. Which is, we're living in a savage capitalism at this point.
So, what do other people say about that? Before I start talking again.
It sounds like public-private.
I'm just trying to
Yeah, no, absolutely,
more like a
absolutely.
a social, democracy, more than, being like totally to socialism, but like more like a social democracy.
We should definitely, before we put forth the idea of nationalizing, look into see how it's being done in other countries.
Do you know what
Yeah.
countries are models?
Like more, the Scandinavian countries, they don't, they like to, they don't nationalize things, like they just.
All I know is it's cold there.
But it's more like regulations, they just control everything through
They
regulations.
do. Scandinavia, they nationalize
But,
their energy sector.
well, what do you have? What do you have in
I'd say like what is Germany doing, for example? So this is something that we need to look more into. But to give you a counterpoint, my counterpoint is the Tennessee Valley Authority. Tennessee Valley Authority was created by the Rural Electrification Program as part of the New Deal. They provide electricity in 4 states, and the only reason they provide electricity in more states is because we passed a law saying that they couldn't expand anymore because they were so good at what they were doing
Right.
that the electric companies couldn't compete. They are a publicly owned company that provides electricity in 4 states. They make about $1 billion in profit every year that they return into their coffers. And even the Republicans in the Tennessee Valley absolutely love it. No Republican politician would ever consider the idea of privatizing the Tennessee Valley Authority or getting rid of it. So, I hear what you're saying, absolutely, and it may be where we end up, but I feel kind of like looking at Tennessee Valley Authority kind of reminds me of Medicare for All. One of the things that they say about Medicare for All is that all the countries that go to it never turn back. You know, if the Tennessee Valley Authority, the only one of its kind, is so beloved by people across the political spectrum, I look at the same way about the Bank of North Dakota, America's only publicly owned bank. Even the Republican, the socialists or the pseudo-socialists who were elected to put it in, the opposing conservatives did their best to destroy the bank because they didn't want those socialists to get a win. And they did a good job of it. They prevented the bank from raising funds. And then when they swept into office, and all the people who were put in office to create this bank were swept out, and this new group came in, they found they couldn't get rid of it because it was too powerful of a tool. Even though they had run on promising to destroy it, and they had destroyed the careers of the people before them on the promise to destroy it, it was so useful to the state that it would be counterproductive to get rid of it. And so that's kind of where I am with that, is that I feel like if we go to these, regulations, then they're just going to be chipped away slowly, or not slowly, or end up in the courts. If we're going to have big court battles about it, let's have the big court battle. We're coming to take your shit because you've robbed the American public for generations. And if we're going to go and battle in court about it, I don't want to battle about each individual regulation. Let's have the real big battle and do it. You know what I mean? That's my feeling of the matter.
And then I think what should probably implicitly be said is then there's like the ground game of like the workers getting organized and like a from below revolution as well. Like it's not all from above. I think that's why I brought up the Immokalee workers. Like it has to also be said, like with Medicare for All, for example, like side by side, which go along with that, is organizing medical workers who are majority people of color. And so and that go on for every point in this. Like at the end of the day, it's got to be from below.
And I once again, I do think that that both the Green New Deals do pay lip service to that. Whether they mean it or not, they do pay lip service to the idea of community control.
Well, one question that I have regarding the nationalization concept. So my understanding is that in order for us to really actually not go into climate chaos, we have to reduce our energy consumption by 90%. It's like massive, right? And if it goes national, one of the things that won't be addressed is the fact that we lose a lot of the energy that we use because of these systems are so large. We lose a lot of energy from these long transfer lines and these massive corporations. And so I guess my confusion with national is those institutions stay in place, and it appears to what is your response in terms of if those things are true, that we have to do massive energy reduction and that we also lose a lot of energy because of these massive power plants, do we want to keep that sort of structure, even one that is beloved, in place?
If we nationalize it, we don't have to keep it in place. One thing I can tell you is that we're not going to create modular or smaller scale energy production if the pipelines and the energy transmission lines are still out there and privately owned by giant corporations. This is an issue that actually the loss of energy through power transmission was not something that I was aware of, and this is an issue that Exxon's not going to deal with as is, especially if there's a profit motive involved. But if there is a program owned by the federal government that owns or controls our energy infrastructure, then the people will have a say, in how we do power generation. And if it requires reconfiguring, reconstructing, whatever, we can't do that while the energy corporations are in control. I mean, I don't know a way that we could achieve what you're speaking of under private ownership of our energy corporations. Unless I'm missing your point.
No, I just think maybe both.
I mean,
In
that's
terms of the inherent, is it really people owned or is it government owned? And there's a big difference with that. And so, I guess it's not to be super combative, but more so just is there a third option? that achieves those goals where it really is in the hands of the people versus corrupt governments, which is something that we're facing pretty strongly right now.
So when energy sectors are under private corporations, they want more people to consume energy because that's how they earn more profits. So if less people consume energy, they don't earn profits. But in case of nationalization, which is under the public sector, if it's not owned by private corporations, then profit doesn't matter.
There's also no competition between utilities.
Is that true, that profit doesn't matter?
It's be sold at cost.
It takes the profit motive out of it, which I think is the core point of the problem with so many things, is that underlying profit motive that keeps making the decision over what's profitable. And if someone cares about anything besides what's most profitable, they'll get fired and replaced with someone who does care only about what's profitable. And in private sector, that's just going to keep happening. One of the things I do like about nationalizing is that that addresses somewhat the profit motive that seems to me central to the source of the problem.
Is there anything that would prevent us from devolving the structure that we have into smaller municipal structures, like with water? I mean, like, we didn't nationalize the water, but if water were privately owned and we were to nationalize it, couldn't we then create municipal systems once we own it that wouldn't be as dependent on long transmissions and things like that?
That's just good sense, that not transporting energy long distances. That's mathematically, that makes good sense.
I think that this is definitely something that we should add to the list of things to be discussed, the localization of energy production. I believe that probably to some degree it's addressed in one or both of the Green New Deals, but some of the points you make definitely make me want to look at that again and make sure that proper attention is being paid to that idea, because I mean, in many ways you're right. If we just have the federal government owning the electricity and thinking of it as a national system and just doing the exact same things, but putting the money back in the coffers, what do we really gain? You know what I mean? Like,
One way that we could put this into effect immediately is Lake Worth owns a utility company, and it's mismanaged.
You said it's mismanaged?
it's very mismanaged, yes.
Right, so getting more involved in the politics of, I forgot what their utility is called.
And Lake Worth Power and Lights, Power and Water, Lake Worth Power and Water.
It's Lake Worth.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah. We're like really expensive.
Yes, super duper expensive.
Yeah, it is very expensive.
Oh, yeah. We moved out of a house once because our water/electric bill was more than our rent.
Yep, that's ridiculous.
Anyone moving in Lake Worth is advised to get a historical record of utility bills, because you may find that your utility bills are more than your mortgage if you have like jealousy windows and a leaky toilet, All right, so we are moving close to the second hour. We got about 10 more minutes in the first hour. Do we have any more discussion about the National Green New Deals before we start talking about what we might see this meaning for the state of Florida specifically, and what we might be demanding of politicians who will be running for office on the Green New Deal out of the state of Florida? Do we have more overall big-scale stuff that we think needs to be considered and reconsidered for the platform?
But who in Florida is supporting this deal? Like, who's the politician out there that is really supporting this deal?
At this point right now, it's hard to say because, I mean, literally the Green New Deal came into the American consciousness at large, outside of us Greenies, in December of last year, when they had that sit-in in Nancy Pelosi's office. The presidential candidates are declaring now, but no one's declaring for governor, or, well, not governor, because we're not governing this time, but no one's really declaring for the smaller races yet. And that's kind of my point, is that I want to be part of the early conversation rather than later conversation. So who do I have in particular that I don't know. I can't tell you I can't tell you of one person I know who's running for sure in statewide elections coming up next time around, because it's only 2019. You know what I mean? And furthermore, I would like us to see what we can't do to inspire some people to run. You know what I mean? It's one thing for people to run, it's another thing to have these conversations ahead of time to give people something to run on, or a reason to run. So, what should the Green New Deal mean for us here in Florida? What are the kinds of things that we need to get done specifically here that we want to make sure are addressed up front rather than at the end?
Like you said, rising sea level.
Rising sea levels are a huge deal here. I know on our coast. Anybody know about the other side? Do they deal with the same issue?
I assume so.
I know that Jeff tells a story about how basically Pinellas could have been cut in half by the storm we had last year. Apparently, under some circumstances, the Tampa Bay could basically separate the two cities and leave them isolated from one another, leading to huge calamities. So yes, what's the best way to deal with rising sea waters? Do we move further inland? Do we build seawalls? Do we... Any ideas? I mean, do we think that seawalls will help fix the problem?
We need to shut down the 2 new plants that we have on this coast.
What
Because the nuclear plants,
I always. Okay.
Please go ahead.
and why I'm saying.
Oh, I know why, because the water's going to go right into them.
Right into them, and we store the waste on site. All of those things that are radioactive for thousands of years, we store that on site. And if a hurricane hits either of them, or water goes above their max level, which isn't that high, then we're gonna go into Fukushima essentially.
Right.
So in terms of addressing the rising sea levels, that's something that we need to do.
That's, once again, something that I haven't heard people speak of in this context, and once again, you are absolutely right. I mean, you lose some houses on the coast, and that freaking sucks, but you have 2 reactors melt down, and,
Refugees.
Bye-bye Florida, exactly. So, yeah, we definitely need to.
Port St. Lucie, I grew up within the zone, like the 10-mile radius zone, and they're regularly releasing radioactivity from Port St. Lucie, tritium and strontium-90. Strontium-90 is regularly released from both power plants because that's what they do. And Miami constantly is the worst violator of any new plant in the country. They ask that they can raise the canal heat levels to absolutely absurd temperatures. And yeah, like I said, and if the waste doesn't get stored on site, we're gonna get impact, usually almost always indigenous communities in the Southwest somewhere. So, sorry for ranting, but.
No, I appreciate that. So, I mean, that should be right at the top of any kind of Florida Green New Deal, is shutting down those plants and moving that waste. Because, I mean, it's one Miami, the first city that's going to go under. That's super duper scary.
I'm gonna find it for you. I'm gonna get somebody.
Absolutely.
I feel like all we have to do is ask Fight Toxic Prisons, and then they would just give us a whole bunch of information on that type of stuff.
That's a very good point. What else would sea level rise do, and what else should we be doing to mitigate or prevent it?
That's an infrastructure thing, I guess,
Right.
which I'm not.
I mean, is that what it comes down to, infrastructure? That we have to just build levees, dams, dikes?
I would want to talk to scientists and do
Yeah.
whatever they say, so people who put a lot of time and energy and research into it.
Also more public transportation, right?
Absolutely. That's
I come from a city that you just come out of your door and you
Right.
have somebody picking you up and just taking you. Your public transportation is like this. Here, I mean, you wait for the bus for an hour, and sometimes after 1 hour waiting, the bus doesn't come. You have to wait for another hour to come. It's like, I don't understand why there's this this lack of organization in the transportation here.
So
Well,
I think
do
this ties in
understand.
directly. No, yes, I think this ties in. I wish Rahilio was here because Rahilio had I had a great conversation about this. I think this ties in directly to housing and the fact that South Florida, if not all of Florida, is the land of single-family homes. And to get a bus system like what you're talking about, how do you do that when this whole state is laid out with single-family homes to have cars? You know what I mean? Like, that's how we designed at least our county and, probably our whole state. And so that's why I think housing needs to be at the forefront of this. We talk about, I was playing a video for her to a guy I listened to. I don't know if you guys listen to this guy, Bo, of the Fifth Column. He talks about a revolution and how people don't understand how freaking horrible that would be for your day-to-day life if it were to happen. Doesn't mean it's not ever necessarily necessary, but it's gonna freaking suck. And these are one of those things where if we want to drill at the core issue of this, it's gonna freaking suck. We're gonna see people like losing their homes. If we actually want to address the issues you're talking about, we need to reconfigure the way that this state's set up. But at the same time, how do we do that without releasing a whole bunch of new carbon into the air? And
Well, look at what happened to Texas in the hurricane. Everything was paved over, the water was run.
They're still working on it.
But no, I do agree that public transportation needs to be at the heart of it. And maybe it's just a matter that we build the public transportation over time.
I think we live like 5 blocks away from a main road. I mean, can we have like a public transportation that comes often, more often, to the main road, and just like when they try to do more trains in Miami, and they were about to raise, I think it was half a penny in Miami, not even a penny, it was 0.5%. The people who were against that were the dealerships, because their business was gonna suffer. So we had to say that we had to point who are against the benefit of the people, and that's what I think we had to make that, to tell listen, we want to make, once again, we want to make profit, but that's not how it works. So yeah, we have to go more to public transportation. It has to. If we do, I mean, I can walk 3 blocks.
I hear you. I'm absolutely with you. Just my concern is when I bring up the problem of the single family home and things like that is that we invest more in public transportation, and I totally believe that we should. And some people would use it more, but many wouldn't. A lot of people just like having their own freaking car. And once again, when the state makes it so much, not the state, but when the zoning and the things that we've done over the past 100 years make it so much easier to own your own car to drive to get to that place than to take public transportation, even if we fund it properly, and have them coming every 10 minutes or whatever. I don't know. I just think that that's a hyper-local issue. I think that this is something that we need to be pressuring our cities to consider when they consider things like their zoning and how they allow housing to go on and things like that.
They are draining wetlands, and like real estate takes over those lands, and like making like lands that were once underwater as prime real estate territories. Like even like the lands that we are here, we're all once underwater. That's why we have limestone here. So we have porous limestone, and water's going to eventually rise through it. So that's not stoppable. So we should either like try to restore those wetlands.
So can somebody who's lived in Florida longer than me talk about the Everglades, what they used to do, what they're not doing, and why we need them?
I gotta go.
You gotta go? All right, yes, 8 o'clock.
Bye.
Having a rich, deep biodiversity and a lot of plant matter and living things and everything that we lose when we pave over large sections of nature, all that stuff moderates and absorbs rainfall and holds it through long seasons. And cutting down lots of that for parking lots and malls and streets and roads really impacts and reduces nature's ability to absorb water and hold it through dry season and hold and absorb carbon. That's all those living plants and animals are laying down carbon, and we've scraped it away far faster than naturally replenishes. And we need to get to much more restorative policies in the Everglades, and also mangroves and a lot of other types of things like that are deeply critical to restorative nature. I would like to see something in the Green New Deal about restorative methods. I would even replace the word organic because of some of the confusion around the meaning and use of that word with restorative, because I think it focuses on when people talk about organic, that's what they care about, that's what they mean, and it gets around from there are companies making a lot of money hand over fist by slapping the label organic on stuff without necessarily a benefit. But if it's intentionally restorative and we understand that's our goal, I feel like that'll be easier to stay on track and not get bought out by those kind of that profit motive trying to take advantage of the labels. That's a thought that crossed my mind.
Well, I agree with you, but at the same time, I mean, we live in this world that this population is growing, and we need more places to live. So it is like, how do we build more houses? And perhaps you, as you said before, we live in a single family, which I love. I'm sorry.
I know, I love it too. I love my car. I love driving my car around all by myself. I mean, I hear you, bro. I hear you.
I have a backyard. My dog loves it too. I am sorry. Thank you. But we live in this world. I had to get out of this kind of living, and to tell me, oh, you got to go back to, let's say, an apartment on the 7th floor, no yard, and I'm gonna be like, I'm gonna get depressed.
If you can,
I'm
if,
sorry,
if
but
you like
I'm sorry to be
gardening and
selfish.
can garden that piece of property and can be part of that, what would you think about that? About either?
No, I mean, I have a garden. I mean, but
then
it is I think it's a very difficult thing, mostly because I see all these cities. I just came back from my country, and I tried to get out of the city, and places where, we used to have a house on the beach, and whenever we had a house, we used to go to the beach, the house on the beach. The only thing we saw when I was a kid were dunes, and you could ride by miles. There were dunes, they were beautiful. And of course you could see the beach, and we just, driving down south. But now, you don't see the dunes. All this new population, people. I'm like, where are the dunes? Forget it, you don't see anything. It's all houses.
And how many houses, empty houses are there for homeless people, and how many people don't have houses?
We don't have
That whole,
He's talking about
We don't have
Columbia.
much problem over there about homeless people. That as you see here. Yeah.
yeah,
Here.
no, I'm not talking about there, I'm
Yeah,
talking
but
about.
here.
So, once again, that goes back to me with,
I mean, we have a lot of buildings.
Right.
there are lots of complaints about, especially since people have been looking at the Green New Deal the Democrats put out, that it's just a laundry list of, what progressives want. But to me, that is the feature, not the bug, in that, it may be, like, once again, if we're talking about doing what needs to be done to try and turn things around, or at least mitigate them enough to prevent, total civilizational collapse in the next 10 or 12 years, people's lives are going to have to change. And it may be that you're asked to move from your single-family home, to a different kind of living. If, in doing that, the Green New Deal, or whatever we call it, loses your support, and that happens a million times over, then it's going to stall halfway through. So it's important that we address things like housing. There are some of us who do well that, we just don't get to live like we used to live. We need to make sure that we're also addressing all the issues that we already have. We know we're already in a housing crisis. So addressing the environmental crisis and the housing part of it at the same time as addressing the actual housing crisis and finding a way, might you be willing to live in a different, type of situation if your mortgage took up a much smaller part of your income? You know what I mean? Like, these are the balancing acts that we have to work out. And, I don't know how we can address a lot of these issues we have in Florida without addressing the sprawl. And that's what we're talking about. We're talking about our own individual sprawl. You know what I mean? Like, I felt so great when she was at my house today saying, I remember you lived in that giant house. It's like, yeah, I lived in that giant house. It makes me feel great. But
because
that's not going to be okay.
I totally agree with him.
That's not going to be okay.
I agree with you, but it's like, yeah, I totally agree. I mean, we have to keep whatever we have left of the Everglades, which I lived in Miami, and I remember when I came more than 30 years ago to this country, and where Kendall used to end in Miami, and now what it is now. I mean, I was there like a few months ago, and I was like, it keeps going all the way west. I was like, this didn't exist before. It was all swamp. But now, there are houses and more houses. So we're taking all their Everglades, and the same thing, Weston, you can see it in Palm, everywhere, which...
Is it affordable housing? Is it housing,
No, it's Miami.
Yeah, it's Miami.
It's Miami, no, it's not affordable.
The new houses here on the west side of Boynton Beach, I mean, they're
Yes,
super
I know what they're
expensive.
putting up.
And some of them, which I consider even ridiculous, because it's 55 and older, and they're like 5-bedroom houses. I'm like,
Well, they're the ones with the money.
how many kids you're gonna have in there if you're 55 and older? I mean, they have a 4-bed, huge houses. I don't get it, but, but as you said, we have to control, or we have to limit that.
I'd like to see designs that allowed humanity and nature to live together without necessarily having to be at odds, building on stilts and allowing nature to grow on ground level, or there's a lot of architectural designs, and that's something I follow, so I see a lot of it. But I really like seeing designs where humanity potentially could, if our numbers grow, perhaps, I don't know if population is leveling off or not, but I feel like if we can learn how to live with a lighter footprint and design things with nature in mind, and trying to be mindful, we don't necessarily have to make sacrifices. I'm willing to make sacrifices. I make them anytime I feel it can make a difference, but I know it's a lot to expect of large numbers of people, especially if there's criticism about it. So to make it more palatable, I do like the idea of trying to design intentionally to give people as much luxury and convenience as can be had, but with a mindful, intentional design that isn't so harsh on nature.
I think we should come out with a new phrase, like social profitability, like something that is, talking about without being, nationalized, but being social, being like humane, as you said, like being caring, but at the same time, perhaps, being, given this option to grow, not to be, I said, just get stuck or stalled in one position, and just to keep growing. So there has to be some social, yes, I do know that, economics is totally the opposite, of social sometimes, because one is just numbers and the other is just people.
But bringing this back to the Green New Deal, let's not forget that there's something that what you say made me think about, that part of the Green New Deal is a job guarantee. And if we need to redesign housing, because he was talking earlier about, I want to see what the scientists say about this or that or whatever. It's like, well, what makes you think that these scientists are getting paid to study these particular issues? Because that's not where the profit motive is.
Yep.
And so maybe we need to find a way to develop city planning and architecture and things like that in our university system, funding a specific portion of our university system to address these problems that are seemingly intractable. You know what I mean? Like moving everybody somewhere to build a whole bunch of new buildings that are designed to be in sync with nature, and then getting people to move back there, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This is, one of the reasons that such a program like the Green New Deal needs to be such a huge, gigantic program that, that involves so many different sectors. All right, so we talked about clearing out, go ahead, please. Maddie.
I think we need to regulate the construction and real estate industry a lot, because they lobby a lot, even with the point in which we saw that, when they were lobbying for some lands that were just otherwise like being used by birds and gopher turtles. Gopher turtles, sorry. So, so there are preserves that have been taken by construction companies.
I made a movie about it.
Yeah.
And it's okay.
So we need to, regulate them before we lose our,
Yes,
land.
that's true, yeah. I mean, once again, as you said, locally, we need to regulate that.
The thing is like, how I see about it is like, if I knew that a place was a toxic waste dump, would I build there? Probably not, right? So like the Everglades recharges our aquifers and it provides us the water that we need. The Everglades is actively dying. It's the largest restoration project in the world and it's not successful.
But we have sugar.
But we have absolutely toxic sugar. As an aside, I don't think the sugar farm workers are organized. I don't know if they are, but they might be a good constituency to reach out to with your inquiries. But literally, development has to stop. We have to figure out how to survive like you were saying, but not in a way that we continue to expand, because we are expanding into that toxic. It's already the Everglades right now is already super mercury ridden, already really impacted by just the barriers that we've created, and so that's kind of how, I second both your things. I just think it's really critical in order for.
Yeah, it's hard to stop it.
So just to build our list of things that we've discussed so far for local Florida, shutting down the coastal nuclear power plants and finding a way to deal with the waste that we've already created there. Increasing public transportation and perhaps reconfiguring our housing to accommodate that. Restoring the Everglades and protecting them from future development, which would kind of, I think, mean like bye-bye Big Sugar, right? I mean, like, there's no way around that.
Bye Big Sugar, there's 3 new highways on the table, one that's gonna go like near the turnpike, so like no highway expansion.
Right, and they're gonna build that whole big wall, and that woman who was running for some office, she was part of that. They were building a whole big wall.
Yeah,
Yes.
what's her name who's running against, who was in the primaries? Yes,
Yes.
I can't remember her name right now.
Yeah, the Northern show is the Anthropocene. There's so much research and so much studies out there as to what needs to be done, what should be done, what has to be done.
I think as I'm sitting here, neither have addressed issues with privatization or military industrial complex or prison industrial complex. And so we have to, so that brings about a lot of things: mass incarceration, gentrification and housing. We kind of talked about that. And I think we should be leading on the 13th Amendment not being abolished, but being amended, that the wording there. So neither, because that's those are serious areas that are that impact us, and kind of like goes all back in a circle. So of course that intersection there. So I think we should be leading on that.
If we're talking local, we don't even need to fix the 13th Amendment. We can just override it with local laws. You know, I mean, just because the Constitution says that Floridians in prison can be used as slaves doesn't mean that the state of Florida law has to say that. You know what I mean? And that may be something that's easier for us to attack than the national law, because quite often the way these things work is this state will pass a law, this state will pass a law, and this state will pass a law, and they hit a threshold, and then they finally decide, let's just do it on the national level. You know, like, I suspect marijuana will be legalized soon, because so many states have passed laws saying that you know, now it is what it is. So I think that we may want to look into addressing that on the state level rather than just on the national level.
Yeah, most definitely state level first.
How many military bases are around here?
We've got quite a few.
Yeah.
How's it going?
Good, how you doing?
Yes, and definitely if we were, first of all, if we closed down a bunch of those military bases, we'd suddenly have a bunch of land that we could use for things like solar or housing or whatever, because military bases are huge. Hi, I'm sorry. Just so you know, we are streaming this live, so if you don't want your face to be seen, stand in the view of that camera right there. I don't know why you wouldn't, but just in case, yes. We're talking about the Green New Deal.
Oh, I thought this was about Nancy Drew mystery. I'm sorry, I'm in the wrong location. No, okay.
We've been discussing the Green Party's Green New Deal and how it should be modernized and updated. As the Green Party of Florida, we're hoping that we can produce a platform amendment to be considered by the National Party. And now, the second hour, we're talking about the kinds of policies that we'd like to see implemented here, specifically in Florida, if the Green New Deal would be passed nationally, so that if we find that the Green New Deal it continues to have steam moving forward, that we can kind of guide it and make sure that we've thought about what we want, because I promise you that all the bad guys are definitely thinking about what they want if they were to come to pass. So some of the issues we've identified are nuclear power plants on the shores that are going to be underwater at some point if we don't do anything about it. The lack of public transportation and the urban sprawl that is such a huge part of living in Florida. Restoring the Everglades because they're almost dead and they're being filled with poison.
Guaranteed livable wage, because we preemption right now in a lot of areas, and I haven't heard DeSantis say he was going to do anything about that yet.
So, what else we got? What else specifically in Florida needs to be dealt with? Energy production. We've got the pipelines that we've got going all over the place. I think we all agree that solar is the way to go here. Is there a better idea on the table? Are there details of implementation that we should be talking about ahead of time, or is it?
That's a drilling project approved in the Everglades recently. So, the National Green New Deal, I think both of them call for a ban on fracking and things like that. So that wouldn't necessarily be a Florida thing, but where do we go from there would be a Florida thing. And I think that, for the most part, we all agree that sunlight's the way to go. It's what we got, right?
Sorry, again, as long as it's not on an industrial scale solar will, as an industrial project, they'll lay out a bunch of concrete, they will destroy ecosystems for the industrial projects. So the best ideal is decentralized.
Like home and business-based?
Yes. Yeah, less localized environmental impacts.
That was actually on my platform last time around, and I fully agree with that. That to me is one of the easier ones, because homes and homeowners and businesses will see benefits almost immediately. So the only real resistance you have is from the electric companies, that profit from what we're dealing with.
So then does that mean smaller grids? You're off the main grid, right? But you just have smaller grids, like community grids?
Yeah.
And there's wind too.
We discussed wind. Do you want to bring up your concerns about wind?
Yeah, well, wind is, I have some statistics here, read that. Wind is responsible for killing a lot of birds and bats, and
And it gives you cancer too.
According to Trump.
No, just the sound from the wind.
Okay, well,
I want to look up the latest numbers on that, because I thought I heard more recent numbers that it wasn't as high as was originally feared, or nearly as high, but I don't remember the specifics.
so the latest numbers are, they used to be very high, but the latest numbers are 214 and 368,000. 214,000 to 368,000 birds annually. And
In the US?
yeah, I think
Yes.
yeah, in North America, sorry,
How-
North America.
How many?
214,000 to 368,000.
That doesn't sound necessarily, that doesn't sound real bad as far as the national.
Well, Migratory Bird Treaty Act makes it illegal to kill any bird protected by the act, even if the death is incidental. And the Baldwin Eagle Protection Act also recommends that we avoid eagle dust by considering like where we set up these energy projects and where we set up associated infrastructure like the towers, power transmission towers and all that.
But it also goes back to, I'm sorry, do I know your name?
Ruddy.
Right. It goes back to Reddy's idea of decentralization in that small-scale wind production would be different than large-scale wind production. I think you're talking about these giant farms, and decentralization is something that, as I said, it's one of our key values, and it's something that, even I need to be constantly reminded of, that it is the way to go because, the giant industrial scale things, how do you build a giant wind farm without putting a lot more carbon into the air? Just to build it, you know what I mean?
I think that there's a general feeling that we need to get off fossil fuels. So that's the starting point. We should be getting off fossil fuels. And then when you're talking about alternative energy, it's hard to make a national policy of what we need. Florida really doesn't have good wind. It doesn't have good wind at all. It has hurricane or nothing. It doesn't work here. We have a lot of solar. So you look at the map, they call it insolation. What's the solar potential of South Florida? Well, South Florida is equal to the Southwest United States in a lot of cases. A place like Arizona is the best, but we're further south. We have clouds, but the intensity of our sun is better. So clearly we should have a lot of solar here. Other people have hydroelectric, there is moving water. There's geothermal in places. So if we start with a commitment that we need to get off fossil fuels, that's how I feel about it. It's like very hard to just say we need to do this, we need this much wind, this much solar, because it doesn't work in some places. It works really well in other places. But if we make that commitment that fossil fuels should be fossils, that this is ridiculous that we're burning fossil fuels. Gainesville built a wood plant not long ago. What a great innovation, wood, burning wood for energy. But clearly, if we make that commitment, then it starts to fall in place what works where. We have waves, we have the Gulf Stream. People are talking about harnessing the Gulf Stream. But I think the Green New Deal should be starting with a commitment of getting off fossil fuels as soon as possible. Really, almost quickly.
Okay. How would we can't stop people driving vehicles. We can when we talk about reducing our energy consumption, we should only focus on industrial energy consumption, and so why don't we invest on like artificial energy production, like been producing energy from the flow of the kinetic energy that's generated by the traffic. Like other countries have tried that, and they have succeeded with it. it doesn't produce a large scale energy, amount of energy, but for a small town, for an urban setting, that's the amount of energy produced is enough for them to serve the residential needs.
And if it can serve nearby streetlights, so it's a very short power distance, then that makes it more efficient, even if it's not a super efficient method. There are places, and another thing that people are putting in roads to go right along that side of thing is vertical windmills. There are different types of windmills, and of course we don't want any bird death we can avoid, but there are types of windmills that don't have this, that aren't killing birds, that address that design issue. So that, I think that's.
But I still feel like, if we're talking about Green New Deal for Florida, I'm with him. Solar is the way to go. I mean, like,
How is the solar working out in Lake Worth? They did a bunch all in one place.
don't know. Has anyone's electric bill gone down?
The problem with solar in Florida was what FP&L did a
Mhm,
few years
exactly.
ago when they defeated
Exactly.
the constitutional amendment, which would have given solar contractors the ability to come to your roof,
Mhm.
install solar, and charge you a monthly fee, just like Dish TV.
Mm-hmm.
If you order Dish TV, you don't want your satellite, so you can get, you don't do this on your own. It doesn't work doing it on your own. Most people don't have 20, 30 grand, even if they're getting tax rebates to put on their roof. It works to do solar, rooftop solar on the grand scale. It has to be structured in a way that a solar installer could come in and put those things down and charge you a monthly fee. I don't think people are going to be saying no to coming to their roofs. I mean, how many people who own homes here would say, look, I'll come to your roof, I'll put the solar on your roof, charge you a fee for it, I'll give you a little credit for the use of your roof. And they collect the money that you're paying, well, in Lake Worth, you're paying the Lake Worth utilities.
Right.
But most people in this area are paying to FPL. They worked very deliberately against that amendment. So now only a utility can sell electricity.
Right, and they could sell the solar to the.
Utility company.
Company, right.
But if they'll run, yeah, well,
But now they can't do that, right? They stop it.
Right. That's
no, nobody but a utility can sell electricity. And FP&L is a regulated monopoly. So they basically strengthened their monopoly by defeating that, and they worked very hard against it by launching an alternative constitutional amendment that was meaningless, but which confused people enough. So their amendment got on the ballot and failed. The good amendment didn't get enough signatures and never even got voted on. So, and it's driving the solar industry out of Florida because people can't get enough work. The solar contractors really don't get enough work down here. It's crazy.
So that's definitely something that we need to be addressing on the state level.
I think that's the, yeah.
I mean, you know, when I ran my number one campaign plank was to remove the ability of monopolies like utilities, which are sanctioned monopolies, to have political speech.
Have what?
Political speech. You know,
Lobbying,
straight up lobbying, and donating, and all of it. I would like to see. And once again, that goes back to what we started with, which is like, that's one of the advantages of nationalizing these companies, is that, you know, they don't get to lobby anymore. You know what I mean? Like,
Because most of the challenge for solar, most communities can't afford it to switch.
but if we're talking about a Green New Deal, I mean,
You should put it on the table.
there should be money for it, exactly. There should be money for it. That's part of what the, right, exactly.
Most people can't afford it. I mean, most people just, they're asked, we'll give you a tax break.
But if
Attention members, as a reminder, our computers will soon be automatically shutting down. Please be sure to save or print any current work in progress as soon as possible. If you borrowed a laptop or a magnifier, please return it to the checkout desk. Also, if you're waiting for a ride home, please call for your ride at this time. Thank you.
Please, ready.
This is a little off the side, because it's more just education. Is anybody interested in knowing a little bit more about the negatives besides the bird impacts regarding industrial wind farms?
Sure, absolutely, please. No, please.
But, so, wind turbines, the industrial ones, can have up to 2 tons of copper. There's copper mines in Nevada, there's copper mines in Nevada, and those copper mines are indefinitely going to be having acid runoff that needs to be managed indefinitely. And so, like, the local impacts to communities there are devastating. In Tamil Nadu in India, where they're processing the copper, communities have revolted against the copper processing plant because of the dangerous impacts that it's had on communities. And people have been killed in trying to shut this plant down. And also, when it's on the industrial scale, like with solar projects sometimes, we have fought, as Earth First, we fought against wind farms that were going to be they were going to destroy forests to install wind farms. And so these are, like, not a lot of people know these things, and so I just wanted to throw out that information regarding wind farms. Yeah, there's like a very strong human element, like negative impact that goes beyond, we need birds, but that goes beyond the birds regarding industrial wind farms.
And that's true of solar farms too, by the way. Like you just said that.
Yeah.
Because one of the projects FPNL is working on, just north of the, well, it's just north of the Big Cypress Seminole Reservation. Remember that power plant we were working on?
Yep.
Well, to assuage the Seminoles, they said, well, we won't put a gas plant on your property. We'll move that further north, biggest gas plant in the country, and instead we'll build a 2,000-acre solar farm adjacent to your property in the middle of primary Florida panther habitat. So now they required 7,000 acres of this gigantic, of this really pristine Florida panther habitat to build a 2,000-acre solar farm and a 3,750 megawatt gas plant in rural Henry County, halfway between the East Coast and the West Coast. And that's the problem with centralized power in general. Florida's potential is rooftop solar. That's where we excel. Really.
And so that's, I mean, we keep getting back to that, and that seems to be a crucial point, is that we want to repeal the amendment that prevents, and perhaps even do mandatory retrofitting of solar on rooftops. If you don't want to do it yourself, the state does it for you, and the state owns your panels and owns your electricity.
Well, what about the utility being forced to do that? I mean, what is there? Everybody's curious about that. What about somehow, just like we have what do you call cafe standards with cars, gas mileages, although those have been thrown out the window. But if a utility is required, like, because they have the money, I mean, they have the resources, because it's coming from people, the ratepayers, so they have all the resources, and people don't. So people are giving the money to FPNL, they can't afford to put the solar, but FPNL makes giga amounts of money a year. Like their profits just skyrocket every time you look at it. It's 50% more than the year before, and they've got lots of money. And if they could somehow, that's a different way of getting around it, is sort of forcing FPNL as a regulated monopoly to start doing the jobs that individuals can't do. That's funny.
I have no issue with, go ahead, I'm sorry, Matty, I can't talk a lot. Matty, please.
Well, I mean, there are people who don't want energy from FPNL or energy at all, and they'd like to live after it. And currently FPL lobbies against them and forces them, like they would get a code enforcement violation for living after it. And FPL forces them to like pretty much, pay them for energy. And people who want to live after it should be allowed to live after it in Florida.
So I absolutely hear what you're saying, and I have we had the same kind of issue I had with Coco when he said something similar, is that I'm fine with that solution, but that's my starting point. To me, my starting point with FPNL is, you've been abusing Floridians for decades, we're going to come and take your shit, and we're going to use your money and use your infrastructure to get this done, and maybe we'll pay your shareholders, a certain amount per share, whatever needs to be done. And then if we need to negotiate down to, well, okay, we'll regulate you. Yes, I want to nationalize the energy sector. Yes, I do.
Okay, that's a judge.
Yes, absolutely. I want to nationalize the energy sector.
And FBL, because we have, in Orlando, it's Duke Energy.
Which is the parent company of FPNL.
Okay, gotcha.
Is it the same?
Yep, Duke, no, it's not the same, it's a parent company.
Are they, so they're siblings?
Parent company, Duke Energy owns FPNL.
NextEra owns FPNL.
I'm sorry?
NextEra is the parent company of FPNL.
Maybe I got that wrong then.
Yeah, Duke Energy, I think, is a relative.
Maybe it is that way, you're right.
They're all in there,
Right, exactly.
NextEra is the parent company, and Duke doesn't own FPNL.
Yeah, because as you said, that totally doesn't make sense to me, so maybe they are parents.
But Duke is big all through the South. I mean, I was in North Carolina, and I saw their coal trucks. Because North Carolina, they what do they call? Crow about their solar, but they're still getting a lot of big coal trucks going through North Carolina.
A lot of problems.
Yeah, and a lot of health problems from them. That's true.
All right, so we got about 15 minutes here. Anything else that we want to discuss?
Do either of the deals address refugees, both coming here and also those of us that are going to become refugees?
I think there was a small hint of that in the AFCs, I think.
I don't remember reading about climate refugees. And my printer gave out, I was going to print out AOC's the one that passed in Congress also, but my printer was crapping out and I didn't have time to get it correct.
But-
I don't remember addressing
I think
the
it was a
refugee
hint, or I
crisis.
assumed it, but it's not strong enough, so ours doesn't address it all.
So that's definitely something that, as I said, when we're done recording this, I'm going to upload this as a private video to Facebook so that I can scrape the closed captions they produce for us back down, so that we'll have something that's searchable later on. And so that's how we're capturing a lot of these ideas, so that we move forward, we'll have someplace to start with. You know, this is the first one of these that we've done, and as we go from county to county, hopefully this can be the starting point. This is what other counties have said and what we're looking at, and go from there. But no, refugees of the climate crisis, I don't know that has been directly addressed. You know, in a larger umbrella, the idea of housing as a human right, which appears in the Green New Deal, or the Green Party's Economic Bill of Rights, kind of includes that, but exactly addressing that, I mean, let me ask just one crazy question, and Reddy and Maddie have been paying a lot of attention to this. If we, and Aaron, if we do some of the things that you guys see need to be done, do we still get to live anywhere we want in Florida? What kinds of places are going to be the places in Florida that people don't live in? Obviously, the Everglades themselves.
I think,
right?
I'm going to just say, because one of the reasons I'm late to this meeting is I was writing up a post on a meeting that's happening tomorrow in the Florida Senate. The Appropriations Committee is going to be voting on, I forget the name of the bill, but it's 3 new major highways, toll highways.
Yeah, she was talking about
You
those.
already mentioned that, right? So those are being built through areas that developers want. In fact, there is some developments along that area already. So 3, one going from Naples to Orlando, basically through Southwest Florida, through very rural Southwest Florida. Another one that goes along the northwest coast of Florida. Another one that connects some highway to the Turnpike, to connect the highway. So there's 3 new toll highways, but those highways are just part of the basic problem of we're paving over this state in an unbelievably rapid pace, and it's making the state, I think if you were to ask Floridians what's your biggest complaint about living in Florida, I think sprawl is, I'm going to say it's not the top to everybody, but a lot of people would find it close to the top. And I think restricting people to where they can live, I say no net loss of habitat, or no loss of habitat, because they say no net loss of habitat, people will mitigate it. So we'll develop 10,000 acres here, and we'll pull some invasive species from 10,000 acres here. But at the end of it, you've got 10,000 acres of more development. And I think that that's just, I'm not seeing that in this, but I just, is habitat protection?
They talk about the idea of, and I was actually going to ask this question, they talk about the idea of afforestation, which I take, afforestation, which I take to mean the opposite of deforestation. Is there an equivalent to that in Florida? I mean, I know that Florida wasn't just a forest when we got here, it was a swamp. Is there an equivalent to that other than just rebuilding the Everglades? Please, Freddie.
From my understanding, yeah, we do have forests in Florida. It's pretty great, but they are rapidly dwindling because they're easier to develop in the swamps. Afforestation does not necessarily mean diverse ecosystems of forests. It can mean tree plantations, and the southeast is ridden with loblolly pine tree plantations, and especially like northern Florida, there's a lot of tree plantations when you travel on I-10. Afforestation has to be, it has to be actual ecosystem restoration.
Yeah.
It can, because it can easily be turned into another industrial
Tree farms. Yeah. Good point.
Which do not help us in the ways that we need for climate change.
We need to be selecting natives and things that, the types of trees that draw down large amounts of carbon. And I mean, anything you plant now isn't going to be drawing down, its peak carbon for 100 years. So I'd love to see protections for old trees. If you've got an old tree in neighborhoods and places that have been there for 100 years, and someone's like, oh, we're going to cut this down and put a shed over here or something. It makes me want to cry when I see an old tree cut down. It takes a long time to get, we don't have machines that can do what that tree is doing. we can't come anywhere close to it. I mean, that all it's built, it's growing up new roots every year, constantly pulling carbon out of the ground and putting it into the soil, pulling it out of the air and putting it into the soil. And if we trimmed the leaves and composted them once a year, that would even accelerate its carbon sequestration a lot more. I'd love to see carbon farming as part of the Green New Deal, figuring out a large way to do a lot of carbon farming where we're helping the trees to accelerate what they do naturally. There are things you can do to help the trees do that. And as far as I know, we don't, I mean, there's a lot of great technologies for sequestering carbon. As far as I know, we don't have anything yet that's as good as a tree. So if we can work with nature in that way and try to reduce some of this damage, some of the situation we put ourselves in.
You know, one of the things we run into all the time, and I'm curious how other people think about this, because is property rights and private property. We come into that all the time. I mean, this FP&L plant I talked about is now on land that FP&L owns. These tree farms are people that own land that turn their lands into tree farms. A lot of the swamps were turned into sugarcane, tomatoes, cattle, and these are privately owned lands with owners who say, well, we're not going to just... I remember one time going to a meeting with the Cooperative Sugar Growers Association. He was meeting with an environmental group. And he told these people flat out, and I couldn't believe the language he used. He says, listen, we're a capitalist entity. We do this to make money. You're coming here and telling us to stop growing sugar because you wanted to restore the Everglades? You're out of your minds. That's not what we do. And he's, you know, he was very frank. He says, we're not going to do this for you.
Capitalism works.
But at least he was honest. He says, we're capitalists. We're making tons of money growing sugar in the Everglades, and we're not going to turn it into anything else unless we're forced to. He says, so you should talk to your politicians. I said, well, this is a pretty honest guy, and they're just sitting there with their mouths open, saying, you know,
that's definitely comes down to it. That's why, I mean, I see it as either eminent domain or, you know, just flat out seize the means of production, you know?
We eminent domain them, but we still have this takings clause in the Constitution. So what do we do with all these landowners that are saying, well, I don't want to grow tomatoes anymore, I want to grow houses. Even the tomatoes were problematic.
Which clause of the Constitution?
What's that?
I didn't hear the word.
It's a takings clause of the Constitution. You can't.
That allows the eminent domain, you're saying?
Well, it kind of, you can't just take.
Right, you got to give them market value, et cetera.
Yeah, somebody has to decide what's the value of that land, and so what, you know, if we're talking about habitat protection, outside of South Florida, where we have tons of public land, I mean, we're really blessed with a lot of public land down here. And that's the word, blessed, because we just have so much of it. But you get out of South Florida, and suddenly it's not. You get little patches of public land, but most of Florida, when you drive around, it's all in agriculture. Cities, agriculture, prisons, rock mines. Those are the things you see as you drive around the state. You don't see much. Phosphate mines, sand mines.
Ladies and gentlemen, the live will be closing in 15 minutes. Please gather your materials and bring your selections to the member services desk at this time. The library will reopen tomorrow at 9 o'clock. Thank you for visiting the library and have a good evening.
And it's all privately owned, so I'm curious what people think we should do with these property owners and property, you know, folks who are trying to capitalize on their land, and what we should do with it.
Well, it depends on.
It's not an agreement.
Right, it depends on how far we're willing to go. If we are willing to say that, you know, we need to fix this problem now and it is what it is, well, I'm not saying that we forego the Constitution and go and you know, and take their stuff and don't pay them. Either pay them for it, eminent domain, or else outlaw the ways they're making money off the land. You know, if you don't want these people to use this land as a tree farm, outlaw tree farms. Write laws about how if you own land, you need to have so much biodiversity. It sounds crazy, but you know what? The whole idea is crazy. The idea that the world's going to end, if we do something about it, is crazy. You know what I mean? Like, so, I mean, there are ways around this. I mean, you know, I don't know why the county of Palm Beach doesn't write a law saying if you are a president and own a country club that charges this much money, you have to pay this much extra taxes. Why not? You know, we write the damn laws if we decided that this is big enough for us to rework our whole society over it, which is what the Green New Deal proposes. Oh, sorry about that.
But we're always running into that, as you know, because this is what I do, is habitat protection.
Absolutely.
It's a property
And there's
thing.
political will, like you say, it's
Of course,
political,
yeah.
it's straight political will. I mean, like, there are ways to do it technically within the bounds of the Constitution. It's just a matter of do we have the political will to do that? And that's what it comes down to. And I'm hoping that over the course of the next couple of years, we will develop that political will to implement one of the 2 or 3 Green New Deals out there and decide that it's that important. And if we don't, then, then we deserve what we get, I guess, is what it comes down to.
How many, I talk to young people. I participated in the climate strike in Miami and talked to one young person who says, people my age, we just think most of us, because it was a small group, most of us are just accepting that this is what's going to happen. They're just accepting the slide into where we're going. And we know where we're going. This is not pie in the sky, and the scientists are telling us where we're going. And the kids, he's saying, my peers are just okay with it at this point. That's what I heard from him. It was the most depressing moment of that.
I know a lot of young people who don't feel that way. I mean, I hear you. And honestly, I had a lot less hope when I got into the Green Party than I do now. Like, to me, like, it was just a matter of, like, maybe we can do some minor mitigation. That's the best we're going to get out of this culture. I'm seeing moves over these last few years that I didn't think were possible for us to get to where we're at right now. I think it'd be possible that we could be having this conversation, like, we mean it. I think we'd, like, come into a room and be like, maybe we should just nationalize all the power companies, and, like, I could find a half dozen people in this county who would, like, well, maybe we should think about that. You know what I mean? Like,
So you think it is possible at this point to build a social movement strong enough that could make these kinds of changes that would actually make a difference? I guess that's the question. Do you think that's still within the realm
actually, this is the first time I think that. This is the first time I think that. I didn't think that
Now.
2 years ago. Today I do, yes. Today, now I do. I did not think that a year or 2 ago.
It's up to us, I think. I mean,
It's
there's just
always
enough
been.
people in here to change the world. But it's the more we want to do, the harder it's going to be. And getting organized and doing it well is always tricky. Good information to go off of is hard to find, because everyone thinks they know the truth. So it's tricky, and that's why I constantly run into questions where the most honest answer I can give is I'd really like to talk to a scientist about that, because that's not my field of expertise. But
the scientists are all radical, I mean, in terms of what they propose.
Mhm.
Talk to a panther scientist. So talk to a panther scientist, they'll say absolutely no loss of habitat, not 1 square inch should be lost. If you talk to a climate scientist, we should be stopping fossil fuel production, consumption, combustion now, now. This is what they're saying, but they're not out there in the community. They're writing papers on it and getting them engaged. To say these things as part of a movement would be an interesting.
All right, I'm going to have to call into this meeting, guys. Thank you so much for coming out and having this conversation. As I said, this is only the first part of the conversation that the Green Party of Florida is going to be having, and I hope that Palm Beach County Green Party will continue discussing this and be on the forefront and making sure that we have, as we pressure our politicians on the political side, we're the activist party and the political party, active policies and things that we want from them, because there are so many stumbling blocks we discovered here as we're talking, like, well, that sounds like a great idea, but can we do that? Is that what we want? Ideas everybody's brought about decentralization and the nuclear power plants and things like that. So thank you so much, everyone.
change the world.
Wonderful evening. Yes, indeed.
Another version?